We left it kind of abruptly last week and left a couple of things hanging. So we're going to go back, get those before we move on. The first thing that we left hanging was Jason made a comment about light being before the heavenly bodies and the sun and everything. And we don't know how that happened. And the Bible doesn't specifically tell us. Okay, but if you go to Revelation 21, and it's there on your sheet for you, it said, but I saw a temple in it, but I saw no temple in it, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb were its temple. The city had no need for the sun or the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God illuminated it. The Lamb is its light. And if you remember when we were talking about creation the first time, which part of the Godhead was the creator?
Jesus.
Jesus. John chapter 1, 1 Corinthians, multiple places in the New Testament it said that Jesus did the creating. So go to John chapter 1 and read the first 5 or 6 verses, and then look in your cross references. It'll take you to a dozen different places in the New Testament where it talks about Jesus doing the creating. And then Jerry made a comment about time when we were talking about the length of the day. And I want to be fair about this whole thing. You want to repeat that? You remember? Putting her on the spot here.
No, I just asked, isn't it bigger than just our day, the first day? Because he created the whole universe. So that was kind of where it came from.
I'm sorry.
God created the whole universe. And it's talking about one day. Wouldn't it be bigger than Earth's day? Couldn't it be?
Okay.
That's kind of where it
Right.
came from.
Now I want to talk about that for a minute. You know what the theory of relativity is, right? E equals mc squared, right? Okay. What do you know about E? First law of thermodynamics. What about E? It's a constant. It's a constant. It does not change. You can change the form of it. You can take kinetic energy and store it in a battery, and it becomes potential energy. Then you can start your car, and it becomes kinetic energy again, and it runs your car. So you can change the form of it, you can change the function of it, but you cannot change E. God provided it, it's here. We can't just neither create nor destroy it. We only use it. All right. So let's look at E equals mc squared. M is mass, and c is the speed of light. Okay. Now, E can't change. The two variables are mass and speed of light. Correct? Did I lose you?
We'll take your word on
Don't
it.
worry about it around E.
Let's say E is 10. We'll just give it a number, 10. 10 can't change. All right. Let's say mass is 1. What does speed of light have to be?
3 squared.
What?
Is that what you were thinking? 3 squared? 9.
E is 10. Mass is 1. What's the speed of light have to be?
10. Or
That's equal 10.
Who said it?
square root of 10.
That's what I was
Square root of 10.
Square root of 10. Okay, it's got to equal. It's got to equal square root of 10. All right. And what was the situation in the beginning when Jerry was talking about when the universe was created? What was the situation in? Mass was 1. We had one Earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The total mass was the earth. Okay? So what would that do to the speed of light? Well, speed of light would be 10. Now, let's go to day 4 when he put the stars and the moon and everything in. So now what's the mass of the universe? It's not just the earth anymore. It's all the heavenly bodies and everything. Okay? So let's say that the mass became 10. what would the speed of light be? 1.
1.
If energy's 10, there you go. Which is 1? Square root of 1 is 1. Did I lose you? Okay. So, the theory of relativity said that the two variables depend upon each other. Well, when we're talking about day 1, we're only talking about a very little bit of mass. So the speed of light could be greater. Well, one of the components of the speed of light is time, right? The speed of light is distance times time. So those two things are going to be affected as well. So it was a day, but we don't know whether a second was equal to the second that we're used to today. We know that it was a period of time specifically called a day. Now, when we get to day 4, we talk about morning and evening each day, and then it becomes what we are today. But I can't tell you for sure with any confidence that a second was the same second then as it is now. But it was a specific period of time that God called a day. And for him, it was a day. For him, a day is like 1,000 years. 1,000 years are like a day. For him, it was the period of time that he used. So to be honest with you, I'd like to say they were all 24-hour days. But up until day 4, we cannot say that. But we do know that it was a specific period of time that God used for a specific purpose. Okay.
I just kind of like
Anybody
to
want to
think
jump on
of
that one?
it. I will. I just like to think of it like, let's just put it on common people, everyday terms. I mean, most of us all get up, go to work, or you go to school or whatever. You do the work that's laid out for you for the day. And when it's done, we say, that's it, chore's done. Let's call it a day, let's go to the house. Said it 100,000 times. I think God was one of those things. That was the chore for the day. He said, calling it a day.
And I'm going to the house.
I'm going to the house. And tomorrow I'll deal with tomorrow's chores. But today is a day.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm on
No more.
I'm on the same.
I think that when you try to reason time with someone who is all powerful and eternal, is not bound by any limitation, much less something as scrawny as time, we're spinning our wheels. It's just another distraction.
Well, it goes back to that balloon where we lay down the timeline on the outside of the balloon, and it's measured and specific. But on the inside of the balloon, God is touching all timelines at all times. For God, Armageddon's already happened. He's been there, he's seen the result, he told us what it was, it's finished in God's eyes. We're still walking toward it. God's not. God is there right now, waiting for us to arrive. So.
Well, he also
And
stopped time.
You want me to explain that to you? No, I can't do that. I don't know how that works.
Well, God also stopped time, so he can control how long the day is and how long it's
Sure,
not.
sure. And there's two instances in the Old Testament where he moved the sun backwards, and where he stopped the sun for a whole day. God is the God of time as much as he's the God of anything else. So, all right, how much mass is in the earth?
Just the right amount. Just the right amount.
Just the right amount.
And that is the right answer.
Just the right answer. If you go to the Big Bang Theory, it says, in the beginning, there was this tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of mass, but it was super dense and it was super heavy and had a whole bunch of gravity, and when it lost control of itself, it exploded and became the universe. That kind of says, if I blow up enough lumber yards, sooner or later, one will come down in the shape of a barn.
Do it.
The nails are in there, the lumber's in there, the shingles are in there, the concrete is in there. So if you just blow one up enough times, eventually it will come down and it will look like a barn. Is there any way in the world I can get you to believe that?
On Bugs Bunny.
Or the Roadrunner? Bottom line is, it's a whole lot harder for me to believe that an entire universe could just happen without any intelligent thought involved whatsoever. But a barn couldn't. Catch that? If you can't believe that you could do that with a barn, how could you believe that a universe would do that? So let's look at what the Bible really says about it. In the beginning, what did God use to create the heavens and the earth? I mean, there wasn't anything here, right? It was empty. It wasn't even empty. There wasn't even anything to be empty. Okay? Now what did he do? He said, let there be. Now, technically, isn't that what happened with the Big Bang Theory? We say in the beginning, God said. There was very little, there was negligible mass, and God said, let there be the heavens and the earth. And what happened? Now, if you don't want to believe that, you come up with the Big Bang Theory, and what does it say? In the beginning, there was very little mass, and it exploded. There was this huge ball of energy that exploded, and it became the heavens and the earth. Same story, they just left God out. See, in all of this, there is a element of truth, and it depends on what we do with it. We can take it and we can believe it and we can trust it, or we can try to make it our own, which means that I want to be God and I want you to treat me like God, and I'm going to let you serve me rather than me serve you. So that's what's happening here. Now, what's the proof of it? If you were to take all the space out of all the elements of all the earth, how big would the earth be? Let's look at that atom there, U-238. If you take the helium atom, you've got an electron, a proton, and a neutron, right? Let's keep it simple. I know there's all kinds of quarks and all kinds of things going on. So let's keep it simple, like it was when I was in school. So, if I were to make the nucleus of a hydrogen atom the size of an orange, where would the electron go? Let's keep everything in proportion. So we got this tiny little neutron, nucleus, made up of a neutron and a proton, and we've got an electron going around it. Let's expand the nucleus to the size of an orange. Where would the electron be?
We wouldn't be able to see it.
It would, mathematically, it would be, you're right. Mathematically, it would be out about where Pluto is. So how much mass is there in an electron, or in a atom? I mean, shrink it back down to what it is today, you can't even see it with an electron telescope. It's all space. Now, let's take a U-235 atom, U-238 atom, that's uranium. It's got 7 valence shells. So you got this one atom of U-238. The first valence shell is, and let's make it the size of an orange. The first one is out around Pluto. The second one is out around the first nearest star, in the neighborhood of the first nearest star. The third one is out in the middle of the Milky Way galaxy somewhere. There are 7 of them. And we can't even pretend to know where the 7th one would be. So you see, you've got an orange and you've got all that space out in the middle of the galaxy someplace, out in the middle of the universe someplace. And then what happens? Well, to get to the next orange, you got to do it all again. And then way out there, we find another orange with all this huge amount of space in the middle. And that's just U-238. So are you getting a feeling of space and mass? Okay. Now, if you were to take away all the space and just keep the nucleus of the atoms and pack them all together in one little ball, how big would the Earth be?
Probably not very big.
Have you ever seen a seamstress pin with the head on it? It's 6 times bigger than the Earth would be. 6 times bigger than the Earth. We literally are walking around on the words of God. The mass is negligible. Now, it works. If you fall off the ceiling and hit that floor, it's going to hurt. We don't sink into it. The gravity doesn't suck us into the core of the Earth. We don't fly off of it and be in outer space. But the bottom line is, technically the Bible's true. He said, let it be. And when you look at the true amount of mass that's in an atom or in the things that an atom makes up, you're literally walking around on the electrons and a lot of empty space. We're walking around on the words of God. Now, you go into science and, they've got orbital tension and all kind of things going on. And you can get pretty deep into it, but the bottom line is, they can't explain it. We walk around on this earth, created by God, like in faith that we're not going to fly off and we're not going to sink in. It's working. God made it work, and we can trust it. But that takes faith. You have to be able to believe that. All right. Well, the Big Bang Theory said it's very small. It is very small, and it always will be very small, because when we become spiritual creatures, we need it. What's the oldest document ever found on Earth? Matter of fact, I just saw something this morning, and she didn't know that we were going to be doing this. She gave up something this morning. What's the oldest document ever found on Earth?
The Kish tablet?
Huh?
The Kish tablet? The Kish tablet?
Is she reading it?
Yeah. Well, that's.
How'd you know that?
Now, look at what it says, 3200 BC. Okay. Now, human beings have been around for how long? 250,000 years. Right? According to the timeline here, 250,000 years. But the oldest tablet is just 3,200 years old. Or in her case, it was, what was it, 1700 BC?
No, circa 14 to 1200 BC.
14 to 1200 BC. What happened 14 to 1200 BC or 4,500 years ago.
The flood.
The flood. All records were erased. And then anything we find now is probably post-flood. So the Bible is once again confirmed, not only by that finding, but by archaeology itself. And they're embarrassed by it. You know, they want to say that human beings have been around for 250,000 years, but they can't find any evidence of it past 1500 BC. Does that click? Mountain ranges. We made a statement last week that if the Earth is really 4.6 billion years old, and you factor in the erosion of granite, of sandstone, limestone, how high would the mountains be today if normal erosion was taking place at the very beginning? There would be a flat,
They'd be flat.
There'd be a flat, well, there wouldn't be any Mount Everest, it would be Rocky Mountains. Well, they have to be relatively young. So where did they come from? If you look at the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, you find deep oceanic trenches down the middle of them. What did Genesis say? Genesis says, concerning the flood, it said that the waters above the earth fell to the earth, and the waters below the earth, or below the surface of the earth, came up through the earth and changed the whole dynamic. Now, in the beginning, even secular science admits that there was one continent. Is there any proof of that?
Yes.
I gave you a map there. Look at the map. Is there any proof of that?
Yes.
What's the proof?
They fit together.
Look between the eastern Americas. Look at the Atlantic Ocean there. And look at the eastern side of America and the western side of Europe and Africa. Does that look like a jigsaw puzzle that might fit? Does it? Okay. Now, what would happen if all the waters in the Atlantic Trench and the Pacific Trench were to shoot up, break loose, shoot up out of the ocean and go up into the stratosphere and then fall back down to the earth as rain? What would happen to the continent?
I said it would look like one of the, when you open up a jar of, or a can of biscuits and hit it and everything just spreads out.
Well, there are trenches in the Atlantic Ocean that are deeper than Mount Everest is high. How much water could they hold? Okay, and they come exploding up out of there and up into the stratosphere, and then they fall back down on Earth and they push it apart. Now, what evidence do we have on land that happened?
Mountains.
Mountains. Have you ever been in a place where you can see, well, like where they build a highway and they cut down in to make the highway more level, less hilly? And have you ever seen the going up to Bloomington? Have you ever seen the layers of rock in there? Have you ever noticed they're never flat? They're always angled to some extent. If that were to happen and you had this continent and it were to be pushed apart, the weaker part of the continent would do what?
Bend, flex.
It would be pushed together, compacted, and the mountains would be created by the forces from the left and the right, right? if you take the mountains, now, when you look at a mountain, it looks like this. So what's its footprint there? About 4 inches, right? Let's pretend that it's about 4 or 5 inches. Now, what would, if you mathematically took the mountains and you were to flatten them back out again, what would happen to the face of the earth?
All the land would be together.
It would put them right back together again. There would be, if you take the Himalayas and you take all the mountain ranges and you take the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachians and all that, and you were to flatten it back out again and push it out, go over to Europe and do the same thing, it would close up the Atlantic Ocean. And everything would fit right back together.
Is that why there are more mountains up north than there is?
That's a good point. I got in trouble with this in school. We were in geology. And we were talking about the mountain ranges and the minerals and the rocks and everything. And he told us that the mountains were formed during the Ice Age, when all the ice got deeper and deeper and deeper at the poles, and it got so heavy that the center began to push out on the outside of the ice edges, and it bulldozed the earth up into piles, and those became mountains. You know, you got this big, big, heavy mountain of ice up there, and it got so heavy that it started to push out and push out, and the outer edges began to push the dirt away. And that's why up north there's very little topsoil, because it got pushed away and got pushed down, and it created the Appalachian and the Rocky Mountains. What's wrong with that? What direction does every mountain range on Earth run?
East to west, or north to south, north south.
North and south. If a bulldozer were to come down from the north and push the dirt in front of it, which way would they run? East and west. Which way do they run?
North south.
Every mountain range on Earth runs north and south. Because when the trench pushed the continents apart, it pushed them apart, and the earth buckled and created the mountains in relationship to the stress that was put upon it. And the stress was put on from a north-south trench to the east and the west. And every one of the mountains was created. Now, does that make more sense than the Ice Age and bulldozer and all that? Well, I kind of got into a debate with him about that, and he didn't like me for the last 3 months of the class. But, I mean, you ought to be able to question things. You ought to be able to say, does that make sense? And finally he looked at me and said, well, there's plate tectonics and all kinds of things going on that we're not going to cover today. He closed class 10 minutes early. I got an A in the class, but I had to give him his answers and not my questions. All right. Dinosaurs and men. According to this, the reptiles are 300 million years ago, and human beings are 250,000 years ago. Would you look at the picture at the bottom there? Now, we're told that dinosaurs and men did not walk around together on Earth because there was a great catastrophe and all the dinosaurs were destroyed by the Ice Age and other theories. What does that picture tell you?
That they were on the earth at the same time.
Now, either that mud base was very resilient, or human beings and dinosaurs have been walking together. Further look at it, and which one made the first footprint?
The foot.
The human being. And then the dinosaur stepped on top and deformed the foot. The foot didn't deform the dinosaur trap. So they walked together in the same mud on the same day, and the human being came through first. Well, evolution wants to tell us that that can't be true. But if you go up to Montana, this fossil is on display in a Montana dinosaur museum. And this is a T-Rex trap. Now, maybe the T-Rex was hunting the man. I'm not sure what's going on there. And maybe the man was just trying to outrun him. But the bottom line is,
His toes are sprayed like he's running.
but the bottom line is they're together. And so, now, what's the bottom line? Number one, the vast majority of it has to be taken by faith. But I gave you several examples in the Bible where the Bible support, like the Big Bang Theory. It basically says the same thing as Genesis chapter 1, except they just left God out of it. They say there's minimal mass. They say that there was an original source of energy from which it all came from. Well, isn't that what Genesis says? In the beginning, God. He was the Eve. And he created the heavens and the earth. There's an axiom when it comes to science that if you're looking for the truth and you have several scenarios, which one is most likely to be the truth? You ever heard that?
The one that makes the most sense.
The one that makes the most sense, and usually it's the simplest one. Well, if I have to start writing stuff like this to prove my point, then it gets really complicated really fast, and we end up with more questions than we do truth. The Bible, we went through the Bible verse by verse in Genesis chapter 1, and it all makes sense. Scientifically, it all has to be in the scenario that it was in, and we have to believe it by faith, but our whole life as a Christian is a scenario where we believe by faith. If we could prove everything scientifically, we wouldn't need God, would we? Now, when we step across the gate, we'll know just how much of me was right today. And it's scary to think that that's going to happen. But the bottom line is, it takes a lot less faith to believe the Bible than it does to believe this. This doesn't even make sense. So, any questions about it? How many of us think I'm big, mean, and ugly if you don't want to make me mad? That's true. Okay, well, we gotta get upstairs. That's the simple part of it. There are, I have a DVD collection that is 13 weeks long. And if Eric, if you'd like to borrow that and show it on that TV, you can have it. It talks about astronomy, it talks about geology, it talks about all kinds of things. But basically, that's the simplistic answer. Now, we can get real complicated, but that's a simplistic answer. And for me, it makes more sense to believe that God did it than it does to believe that it just simply blew up and we got this majestic universe that happened by coincidence. That is ridiculous, in my mind.